In defense, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, before we get back to the Gemara, I want to make mention of what Rabbi Gimel just told us with respect to the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. So we said last week, earlier this week, not last week, that the Gemara says that Ezra was named as, there was no book of Nehemiah written after Nehemiah because of his sins, either his sense of entitlement, or the other opinion was, what was the other opinion? Sense of entitlement, and
Also, he put people down.
he put other people down, right, which we connected to.
Yeah, I saw one of them in Yaakov Mesa. He
Makes a connection there.
If someone put someone else down, get on.
Well, Shekivanti.
Yeah, he loses.
And we asked then how the division of the 24 books goes accordingly.
Yeah,
so it turns out that in the Gemara's time, the book of Ezra and Nehemiah were actually one book. So Rabbi Gimel led us this information here. And in this Tanakh, they put an introduction. There's actually Christian theologians who separated Ezra and Nehemiah, but later accepted by Jewish people, similar to chapters. Chapters in the Torah are actually created by the Christians, but the Jews accepted it mostly by default, because if you want to debate the Christians, you have to be able to cite chapter and verse, so you have to have the same chapters and verse. Also, their chapters had numbers, our chapters had names, which made it much more difficult to cite to. Like, you look in the Rambam and it wants to cite to a verse, he'll open the chapter with the first verse as opposed to a number. Makes it more difficult. Anyway, but here he says, from Rabbi Azulai, from the Chidah, that over the hundreds of years, Nehemiah's sins were atoned for, and thus he got a half a book named in his name, because he atoned for whatever sins through life. And he makes mention of another sefer which says that Rabbi Gamliel was a reincarnation of Nehemiah, and Rabbi Gamliel, suffering humiliation and being deposed from being the leader of the Jewish people, atoned for Nehemiah's sins. So Nehemiah had this sense of entitlement, and here Gamliel is put down from his position, thus atoning for Nehemiah's sins, and thus getting him a book, getting him half a book. At least split the book of Ezra into two, and he gets a half a book in his name. So we have Ezra and Nehemiah, although technically speaking they're one book. The question still remains on the Rambam's position on this. We have to look at the Codex, which we don't have here. Do we have the Codex? Yeah, I don't think we have the Rambam's Codex. Anyway, okay. So at the end of Wednesday, we mentioned this Gemara.
Oh, here it is. The Baal Torah brings this one. Good.
Which says?
And here he brings Daniel and Ezra.
Not Nehemiah.
That's right.
Right. When you count in the 24 books, Ezra and Nehemiah are one. Though colloquially speaking, we call it Nehemiah.
So even in his time, it wasn't accepted as a separate.
No, it could be it was accepted, but just when you're listing the 24 Sfarim, you can't separate them because the Gemara doesn't separate them.
Yeah.
But colloquially speaking, it could still be that in those days they call it.
Yeah, but he should have made a remark, but if his man is there, but didn't.
Well, what's the context? You're talking about the context of writing a book halachically speaking. Yes, he wouldn't. No, when you're talking about the halachas of how to write Sfarim, he wouldn't separate Ezra and Nehemiah. It's only colloquially that we separate them. That's what it seemed, at least.
Someone should have made a remark, though. It's like with a guy of Guerrero thing, by the way.
All right. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so we mentioned the Gemara.
So bottom line, what? There's 24 and a half books.
So there's 24 books that have been split into 25 now.
That we've done, yeah.
Oh, interestingly enough, I don't know.
But especially
that's why it was strange to me, because the Gemara makes mention of Chavdalat Sfarim.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just assumed that we had 24 books based on our count, but I guess it's not. It depends on. It's only 24 if you have Ezra and Nehemiah together, which is very interesting. So more to be discovered on this history of when this happened and how it split and why Jews accepted it. I imagine the same reason they accepted the chapters.
The chapters for sure were to accept.
No, but I imagine it's the same reason why they.
For disputes, he wouldn't be able to.
Right, but if you're going to dispute verses, you're going to say Ezra chapter verse 500, and the other person means Nehemiah verse 10. Yeah, it's going to make it complicated also. Right, so the same way they accepted the chapters, I imagine they accepted this as well. It would have the same logic would follow.
Yeah.
If you're going to have discussions and debates with Christians, then that's what's going to happen.
You have to have a similar.
Except the same numbers, same citation. Okay, so the Gemara we mentioned yesterday, on Wednesday, had this incredible Gemara of Daniel, Chagi, Zechariah, and Malachi walking together. And Daniel says, I saw the vision, but the three that were with me, Chagi, Zechariah, and Malachi, did not see the vision, but they trembled.
Also in Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah, also.
No commentaries, I'm trying, so someone should make them,
You have to look for historical commentaries, not for halakha commentaries.
Yeah, I agree.
At any rate,
to be researched.
Yeah, so Daniel says he saw the vision, but the people with him did not see the vision, but they trembled. And the Gemara explains why did they tremble? Because even though they did not see, their mazel. We explain the word mazel literally comes from the word noiza, which means drip. That is to say, the spiritual source of divine energy, the channel through which the person's divine energy comes into his body. And that is what saw the vision, and therefore they trembled. The Gemara then remarked that at one degree, Chag Zechariah Malacha were greater, in that they were prophets and Daniel was not. On the other hand, Daniel was greater in that he saw this vision, and they did not see the vision. I should note that Rashi mentioned that in many of the books, that line, making this remark that one is greater than the other, is not in many of the books. Some of the books that Rashi had of the versions of the Gemara is not there. It just continues the story without making the remark of one greater than the other. Just making note of that. It's going to be interesting because we're going to try to analyze it. Just to note that it doesn't exist in some books, because I think this is the hardest part to grasp. If you're a prophet, why aren't you seeing that which somebody else who's not a prophet sees? As if like there's different sets of vision, one for prophecy and one for something else. We'll have to try to identify what that is. And then the Gemara says like this, which means that if a person suddenly gets a fright, it means his mazel, his spiritual source, is seeing something, and the Gemara gives three things he should say or do. One is he should jump out of his place, jump 4 amas. Okay, 1. 2 is he should say Shema. And 3, if he's in a place where he can't say Shema, he should say, the goat at the butcher shop is fatter than me. As if to say that whatever this thing is that's scaring the neshama, which is causing me to have a sudden tremble, should go attack the goat and the butcher rather than me. That's literally what the Gemara says.
You know, the Gemara Megillah has the order reversed for the Shema and jumping the 4 amas.
First Shema,
yeah.
Then
4 amas.
Then 4 amas, then the goat.
Yeah.
Right, I remember that. It's just first says Shema. If you can't say Shema, then jump out of the place. And if you can't jump out of the place because you can't, then make this remark about the goat.
But here's the difference.
Yeah, which may be interesting.
Some connect these.
Okay, sorry?
Some say that the first, if in the current order of Megillah, say the Shema. If you can't say the Shema, then move 4 amas from the Tzoah and then say the Shema. They connect the two.
Right.
But I agree, here it's different.
Okay, so let's try to analyze this on a spiritual. Sorry?
Do this or this or this?
Yeah.
Not
well, actually, it's not and. It's first jump. The Gemara here is first jump away. If you can't jump away, say Shema. You can't say Shema because it's dirty, because there's excrement or something that precludes you from saying Shema. Then you make this proclamation about the goat being fatter than you.
But the order of Megillah is...
Or the Gemara's reverse.
Reverse, yeah.
You say Shema. Yeah. You can't say Shema where you are because it's dirty. Jump away and then say Shema. You can't do that, then make this declaration about the goat. Okay, so let's try to understand a little bit of this on a spiritual level. That's literally the Gemara. So the first thing to address, and this is something that I haven't seen in this, and then the rest I haven't seen, I'm just kind of building around it. What I have seen is as follows. This idea of mazel, of everything having a spiritual counterpart, or this channel through which a person's, or everything, not just the person, there's actually, you have a similar statement about mazel with a blade of grass, actually. The Gemara says about a blade of grass, can't remember the lashon, but the expression is that a grass will not grow unless there's a spiritual counterpart, and this mazel telling it grow.
It's called inclusive Esav?
Yeah, Ellen Cain mazel, Maka Boiva Omer Gadal, unless there's a mazel which knocks on it, literally, Maka knocks on it and says grow. As if to say every single individual item in this world has a specific spiritual counterpart that's its channel for divine flow. In the language of Kabbalah, this is like Seder Shtalshlos. Seder Shtalshlos is the flow of divine energy that goes from one world to the next in a slow devolution. I think that's the word, devolution. Devolves. The divine energy slowly devolves, and then it becomes more and more concealed and more contracted, until it finally fits into a blade of grass, into a cup, into a table, into whatever it is. We've talked about that many times. But when you're talking about a neshama is a chelek alaka, it's a part of Hashem, so it transcends the system. A Jew lives within the system, but he's like a portal to that which is beyond the Seder Shtalshlos. But he too has a mazel. The Gemara says here he has mazel. He has this mazel, he has this drip, he has this thing which... So Chassidus explains as follows, this I've seen, that a person's neshama, a person's soul, essentially a person's soul is way too lofty to exist in a body. On its own, it does not make sense that it's in a body. In fact, Chassidus always says that it's koyach hamafli lasos. It's the one of the wonders of Hashem and that the neshama is actually in a body. That in and of itself is one of the wonders of Hashem, that a spiritual entity. The truth is, this is true even of a nefesh bahamis, which is a spiritual entity. But furthermore, certainly we're talking about a godly soul. The fact that a godly soul is within a body is in and of itself a feat that transcends nature. So Chassidus explains that the truth is that not the entirety of the neshama comes into the body. Not the entirety of the neshama comes into the body. And if you look in the language of the Medrash, nefesh, ruach, and neshama are invested in the body. Chai, yechid are makif. They stay somewhat above. And even beyond that, there are levels of neshama that don't come into the body, but they're tethered to that which is in the body. If you're looking at a TESHUVA, for example, when it talks about a person who does sin, and in that sin he draws his soul above, plus the source of his soul down with him into the sin. Right? And uses the metaphor of a strand, a string, a rope, with the human beings at the bottom, with the soul that's in his body, and wherever that goes, he's pulling the other top of the rope with him. So there are levels of spiritual truth, his own soul essentially, parts of which are still not in his body, that get dragged around with him wherever he is. So in the same way, a person can do a sin and drag with him his soul that hasn't come into his body, and then the source of that, the hey of Hashem, as it says in Tanya Geras HaTeshuva. Likewise, the reverse. If the soul up there starts to shake like the top of a string, then the bottom of the rope also shakes. So in the same way, when I do a sin or a mitzvah, I'm dragging the soul with me because I'm the bottom of the rope. So likewise, if the top of the rope sees something, it shakes me down here.
A good example would be a kite. Give an analogy. A very large kite. So that
if the wind blows up there, my hand pulls, and if I pull, the
it works both ways. I can pull the kite, or the kite
can pull me. Goes both ways. That's right.
Yeah, and it can be very far away, so it's not visible. The kite.
Of course, this is all metaphor. I'm not talking about distance. Not like you took a rocket ship into the sky, you'll see the soul up there. But
Rashi actually, they bring the Rashi here, both on Daniel and from the Gemara and Megillah, like the Sar Shal Mila or.
Yeah. It's different language, all for the same idea.
Same idea, yeah.
Whether you're talking about Kabbalistic language, Hasidic language, or Gemara language, it's all the same idea.
Same concept.
So there's a famous mimer actually where everybody talks about that there are two levels of faith of the Jew, and this is actually one of the Mazlai Ochaz is actually a lower level. But the level is identified as follows. There's one level of connection to Hashem that's built on cognition, the person understands and learns. Then there's a level of chazi, where you vision. It's deeper than understanding and learning. When you see something, even if you don't understand it, right? This is going to help us understand a little bit the difference between prophecy and Mazlai Chazi, and why one person can have one without the other. The difference between seeing something and understanding something. You can see something and therefore you are absolutely certain of its truth. Right? That's one of the reasons why Ein Eid Nasadain, that there mentions in the footnote of that mimer that I'm making reference to, the Atat Sava, famous mimer. The halach is that Ein Eid Nasadain, which means a witness, someone who sees an event, cannot be judged. On the surface of it, why? You saw it, you know the truth, you're the best judge. Why can't a witness be a judge? So the halach is because a judge's job is supposed to be, first of all, to be impartial, but moreover, in some cases, actually, the judge is supposed to find favor. But if I saw Mr. A murder Mr. B, it's going to be very difficult for me to find reason to get him off the hook. When as a judge, it's my job. Why? Because when you see something, the truth of that thing becomes so real that you can't undo it. So it's a deeper faith than understanding something. So developing a connection to Hashem is based on understanding, and that's my level. That's not really a faith even. That's an understanding. Faith transcends understanding. Where does real faith come from? From vision, from seeing something. So because the soul above sees godliness, Mazayu Chazi, the soul above sees godliness, and over there was talking about the job of a leader who's supposed to feed the Rai Mahemnu, who's the feeder of faith, feeds the Jewish people faith. That's his job. And one of the jobs is to help the Jew be conscious of the level of his soul which sees godliness. There's another level that mentions there also, but that's the level here, Mazlayu Chazi, where the job of the Rebbe is to help the Jew connect to the part of his neshama above that actually sees godliness, where there it's true because it sees it.
I have a problem with that. Why do we close our eyes in the Shema? I thought that's when we really see. When our eyes are closed.
We're not talking about physical vision here, obviously. And in fact, maybe your physical vision is actually blurring your real vision.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so vision is a metaphor. Why are we calling it vision? For this idea, because it's so true that it's like a vision. In the mind's eye, or the soul's eye. It's not talking about literal vision, but why are we calling it vision as opposed to hearing? Right? Their mazel heard about it. No, their mazel saw it. In other words, the reason why we're using the metaphor of vision is because vision implies a much deeper connection to the truth of that thing. And thus, it calls it vision here. Now comes the next part. 1 second, before we get to the next part, this might help us understand how you have on one hand a prophet who doesn't see the vision, whereas the other person sees the vision, but is not a prophet. Because the truth is there are two different levels of connection to Hashem. I haven't seen this written anywhere. I'm kind of suggesting here, and you can disagree if you'd like. But if you're going to go with the Rambam's definition of prophecy, the beginning of his introduction to Mishnayos, where he talks about prophecy as the highest level of cognition, essentially. A person ascends one level to the other level of understanding, deeper and deeper insight into the truth of our world, and then to the insight of, right, he mentioned this in Moreh Nevuchim also. A person gets insight into Torah, and then from there he gets to a level of prophecy. So it's kind of, if you want to envision it someone like this is my projection on the Rambam. I haven't seen this written anywhere, but imagine if I drop this, right? So all I see as a layman is a key falling. A scientist sees gravity. A greater scientist, if you're really, really amazing, would see the weight, the density of the whole key, and can tell you before I drop it, it's going to make this kind of sound. Is he a prophet? Is he seeing the future? He has a deeper insight of what he sees right now, and that's why he can see the future.
He sees quantum physics.
He sees quantum physics. I don't know how that works. I'm nowhere near that level of science. But the idea that a person can see the truth of something that is, and from there divines the future, not because he's... Follow what I'm saying? So prophecy in that sense is a very, very deep level of divine cognition, thus allowing you to look at the world around you and see future, which explains some prophets who have more blurry vision and some who have less vision, right? A scientist can look at a situation. One scientist who has a much clearer understanding, a much clearer view of what's happening, can be much precise on what's about to happen if you press that button. The other one's going to say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you it's going to be roughly around there, right? So
that's the Rambam.
This is the Rambam. That's correct. This is all from the Rambam, but this example of the key dropping is an example of my own. But I think it follows. So if that's the case, then prophecy is a question of cognition and understanding. The vision of the soul is not a question of cognition and understanding, but a question of faith, deeper faith where you see a truth. And therefore one can have one and not the other, or one can have the other and not the other one. So one person, Daniel here, maybe doesn't have that deep level of cognition like Chagi Zechariah Malachat prophecy, but he was so deeply connected to his soul above that he's able to see these things, or certain things. Whereas Chagi Zechariah Malachi, who are prophets, have a very deep level of cognition, but cognition doesn't help when you're talking about a vision, Mazlayu Chazi, where the soul is seeing the truth of Hashem in this faith level. In other words, if the vision is connected to faith, the mazel viewing is connected to faith, and the nevuah is connected to seichel, to cognition, then you can excel in cognition and not in faith, or you can excel in faith and not in cognition. I'm really suggesting this because I haven't, and that's why I said it's...
Were there not Nevi'im in Tanakh who don't fall into either category, where it was just a God-given gift of some kind, where we don't know clearly whether they were whether it was cognitive or whether it was just they were in touch with their soul. They just
clearly it's a combination of both.
Even the bad prophets,
clearly it's a combination of both. It's clearly a combination of both. There are clearly indications where God specifically shows visions and things like that. But at the same time, we have schools of prophets where people study to become prophets. Literally, they sat down, and there are certain different verses that describe them as like Meshuggah. Actually, the word Meshuggah appears there, where they appear to everybody else to be like Meshuggahim. They were doing all kinds of things to divest themselves of their attachment to this world, so they can get higher levels of understanding. But they were schools, starting from nowhere and climbing up the levels. Sorry, also in the Rambam, yeah.
They're in a trance when they get enraptured with Hashem.
Yeah, because they're divested in his pashas agashmis. It's divested of.
Moshe was the same when he had the vision, or when it's not a vision.
Stayed.
He was totally controlled.
But that's what I'm saying. On the other hand, it's clearly a combination of both. There is clearly a choice on God's part to reveal and not reveal.
You can study as much as you want, but Hashem may choose not to give the person the gift.
Good Chodesh, good Shabbos. So that would explain the difference between prophecy and Mazlayu Chazi, one cognition, one faith, and if we can have one one excel in one and one excel in the other. Now let's see if we can get to
other commentaries raised about the question. A prophet gets the word b'shem Hashem, but Daniel and a sefer is either in a dream or a malach, not really from Hashem. That's one difference. Other point out that Daniel was extremely concerned about the geula, and so you can argue in this case, since he was so concerned about it, then Hashem gave him that gift. While other prophets, were prophets in general, but they weren't as bothered. He was really bothered by it, as he mentions himself many times.
But here's lav navi, not prophets.
That's right. So
anyway,
when you say an interesting point, what comes up from this then, is someone who has a great interest in a certain subject and is sincere about it, Hashem can give him the gift like a prophet, even though there are other people that are prophets. That's what happened. Now, there is a question: why was Daniel so involved with the Gula and the predictions, the numbers, more than other prophets? Because that was he was
concerned for the Jewish people like that.
Exactly, concerned about it. It really bothered him.
He was a leader like that.
Interesting point.
Whatever your bent is.
Exactly. It's not only your bent,
but it's more than that. Also, it's also this idea that you can be a prophet in the abstract and have beautiful thoughts, but then there's a leader of the Jewish people with a different type of care.
There's also the need. It's your bent, and it's also the need.
Yeah, so there's also it actually connects to this.
Also is a position of importance, like the other prophets were like not in the court, but Neil was in the court. So there's all the.
It also adds to it connects to this idea in that, like when you're talking about amunah, the word faith also comes from the word oimen, which means like realism. It's almost like for Daniel, this wasn't a question of climbing levels of connection to Hashem like a prophet. It was a question of real life issues that people were suffering. So there's a certain faith in that connection that's even deeper than, or has a different angle than just cognition and understanding Hashem. Anyway, I just want to conclude with understanding these three things, perhaps suggesting a way of understanding these three things: leaving the place, saying Shema, and talking about the goat and getting rid of this fright. Okay, so this again I haven't seen written anywhere, and of course you're welcome to disagree or suggest otherwise. So when we say mazlayu chazi, the person's soul sees, and thus that's where faith comes from, because it's deeper than understanding. It's something you see, something the soul sees, and the challenge is to connect to that part of the soul that sees, so we can experience some of that faith. So when a person gets a tremble, gets a fright, perhaps it doesn't just mean a little fright because the soul is seeing something that's about to hurt him, but it could be like a random time when a person gets a tap on the shoulder and it feels like he has to do tshuva. Hiru tshuva. So this says this, that a person gets a hiru tshuva, a person gets a jolt to do tshuva, comes from this part of the soul which sees godliness. It's like a like using the example, the kite. The kite up there starts shaking, so down here I start shaking also.
Like a premonition.
A premonition, a feeling that I have to do teshuvah. This happens most common during the 10 days of teshuvah, between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, because that's when the Kiruv HaMorel and Nitzutz, when the soul's experience up there becomes more connected to our own experience down here, and thus there's this sense to have to do teshuvah. So a person needs to seize the opportunity. When a person feels that, when a person feels this shake, that he's getting a connection to his soul up in heaven, who's seeing the truth, Mazlayu Chazi, and he gets a shake down here, he has to seize the opportunity. He can't let it go squander. So there are three elements, or three stages, in what he needs to do in his teshuvah. The first thing is leave his place. What does leave his place mean? There's literally moving it for get change. The Alter Rebbe begins the Gersa Teshuvah by saying that mitzvahs teshuvah min Torah. The definition of teshuvah down here is azivas hachet bavad. Abandon sin. You become a new person. It's not about obsessing over your past. That's not what teshuvah is about. It's a mistake. That's atonement. That's kapara, and kapara primarily is God's business. Your job is teshuvah, return, which is a new person. Yesterday I was a man who sinned. Today I'm not. Done. I abandon who I was as a sinner.
But sometimes you need that regret first, though.
The regret is only so the importance of the regret is so that the decision to no longer sin is true. But the primary focus is the decision to no longer sin. The regret is only that. If you really want to you can't say that I still like sinning, but I'm not going to do it anymore. It's a fake decision to say I'm no longer sinning. So the regret is only to augment or to perfect the initial decision. But the primary focus here is I'm no longer sinning. That's the primary focus.
It gets you there. I know I've gone through it.
So I just finished saying that, but you have to remember that, because it's also important to remember the reverse, because people get bogged down in what they've done and it doesn't let them move forward. Tshuva is a very forward-looking reality. Sometimes you need to stamp out the past to be able to move forward. It's true, but the primary thing here is the focus in the future. And that's what we're saying here. Move out of your place. Boom, out. Where are you going to? But where are you going to? You're going to Shema. You're going to Shema. That's the next thing you have to do. Say Shema. You're going to the oneness of Hashem. It's a deeper level of teshuvah. A deeper level of teshuvah is teshuva tata, as the Alter Rebbe defines it. The lower level of teshuvah is a teshuvah of behavior. That's the lower level of teshuvah, is the teshuvah of behavior, which means I used to behave this way, now I no longer behave this. I no longer behave this way, now I behave another way. That's abandoning sin. A high level of teshuvah is teshuvah law is no longer. It's not just a question of a teshuvah of behavior, but teshuvah of my feeling and understanding. And that I've completely transformed the way I feel about the world, the way I understand the world, and not just how I behave in this world, which is the first level of teshuvah. That is reflected by Shema. Declaring Hashem's oneness. As the Alter Rebbe actually says in today's Tanya, that the high level of teshuvah, yesterday's Tanya and today's Tanya, that the high level of teshuvah comes from prayer, connected to Torah study, but prayer, the blessings of Shema and Shema itself. That is to say, to generate feelings for Hashem to the point that I say, God, you are one, and I love, and the truth. Because not just I've abandoned my past and that I no longer behave the way I used to, but I abandoned my emotions, my feelings and my understandings are only for you, Hashem. It's a high level of teshuvah. Now, what happens when a person gets to this high level of teshuvah? Now his past is transformed. The goat, the animal soul, is fatter than me. Or another way of saying is the literal reading of the word is easy to beitavcha shmini minai. The goat that's in the butcher shop is fatter than me. But you could translate it like this: the goat that's in the butcher shop has become fatter because of me. Shminai is fat now, minai from me. In other words, because of what I've done, because of my tshuva, my animal soul now has become greater. Meaning to say, when a person abandons his behavior, his negative behavior, what's he doing? Even if his animal soul says, I want to do sin, he's controlling himself because he's not behaving that way. But when a person transforms the way he feels...
But how would you explain the makam tinafis?
Sorry?
How that fit? If he's in a makam tinafis, he can't say Shema, then he should say this. So it's like the speech Shema is really better.
Sorry?
He can't say Shema, he has an alternative.
Yeah, in other words, the makam tinafis means he still has connection to his animal soul. He has to transform it by taking it to the butcher shop and slaughtering it. And in that slaughter, it becomes fatter.
So he can't reach the Shema yet. He has to.
That's right. Or part of his process of saying Shema, or actually put it this way even, a person can, in the moment of loving in the moment of Shema, love Hashem truthfully. But it doesn't take away from the fact that 20 minutes after davening, he loves his life as well, because he has an animal soul. Which comes to the next step. He's got to take his animal soul to the butcher shop. He's got to slaughter his animal soul. His animal soul, actually in Shechita and Chassidus, is elevation. Where a person elevates his animal soul to bring it along to the Shema. That's the butcher shop. The butcher shop is taking his animal soul and bringing it to, because he's tenaifis, because he still has dirt, because he still has an animal soul, he still has desire for negative, he's got to bring his animal soul to the butcher shop and elevate it to the level of his Shema. And then he's fatter. His love for Hashem is now more intense because he's now elevated his animal soul.
But then at the beginning is saying that he has to move away and become a new person.
Yeah, behaviorally, attached to Hashem emotionally. But now he has to bring along his animal soul.
Okay, he has to work.
He has to bring along his animal soul.
Reach the level, yes.
That's right. His godly soul can love Hashem and he can feel it, but his animal soul is left behind. And that 20 minutes after davening, he still loves his life. He still loves his physical life. So he has to bring his animal soul to the butcher shop. And if he does that, then his love for Hashem is now fatter. Shmini minai is now fatter because of what I've done. The animal soul brings a certain passion to the love of Hashem that the godly soul does not have. Rav Tuis b'koyach shor. The greatness of wheat is done through the ox specifically. With two hearts. With the animal soul and the godly soul. It's there could be the godly soul loving Hashem through Shema, but the animal soul is left behind. It's a makam tenaifis. It's a place of dirt. Bring it to the butcher shop to get it slaughtered, to get it elevated, and then shmina minai is now there's a fatness, there's a passion in his love for Hashem that comes because he brought his animal soul along, but it's even greater than the love that would have happened just from the godly soul alone. So this is a suggested understanding, which you're mentioning in Megillah, the order is different, so we have to think about how that would be. But at least over here we have this understanding. Again, it's suggested, and you're welcome to disagree.
Can't you say that Shema is a declaration, and then the third one we still have action to perform? In other words, the Shema is just the beginning of getting to the next. I'm
suggesting that actions first, because
I know you originally you were talking.
The first thing is action. The first thing is always action. The first thing is always like Kabbalah soil. You got to accept what God wants and do it, and then you work on how you feel about it. Right. The first thing is behave the way Hashem wants. It's the lowest level of tshuva. Then you work on how you behave, how you feel about it. First, the godly soul, getting those godly souls feelings going, and then bringing the animal soul along with it, bringing it to the butcher shop, so to speak.
But is there somewhere it always, to me, it seems Shema, if you're terrified, if you're in any trauma, so to speak, what's the first thing a Jew would think of?
Yeah. That's the first level.
I'm just saying.
That's what commentators say.
That's the first level. That's the basic understanding of the Gemara.
Yeah.
It's the basic understanding of the Gemara. This is the deep.
Exactly.
Trouble,
for sure. The basic.
I say the Shema to get your into heaven. So
this is that's the basic understanding of the Gemara. Practical, but hopefully you never have to use this way of thinking about it. Is a person, God forbid, swerves. He's sitting in the car and someone's next. He's a passenger in the car, and the other guy swerves and almost misses an accident. What's the first thing that comes to your mouth? An expletive, because you're worried about you got to crash, or is the first thing come to your lips Shema? That's like the defining way of like for a half a second you feel an existential threat. What comes to you?
The second you go through a corrective process.
Do you say Shema? That's a simple. That comes later. I'm talking about in that second when a person gets that fright.
You're so startled.
That's the simple reading of the Gemara, but I'm suggesting a
basic biological.
That's a simple.
As people.
That's the simple reading of the Gemara. I'm suggesting a deeper level. Anyway, a good Shabbos, a good Chodesh, everybody. Yeah, but you're right. That's the simple reading of the Gemara. I was suggesting a deeper, more Hasidic interpretation.
But the Gemara is saying if you can't do Shema, then say this thing with the.
All right, have a good Shabbos and a good Chodesh, everybody.
Yeah, but that isn't.